So, I'm going to invite Lois, Drew, Nicole to come up here. Got a few thoughts for you. I'm going to let them go first, and then I will share with you some closing thoughts. Yeah, you can use that one. That's fine.
Well, I know you're anxious to hear about what we actually did at the work sites. Nicole and Drew are going to tell you a little bit about that. I just kind of want to tell you what our typical day kind of was. So we had breakfast at 7. As soon as you were finished with your breakfast, everyone made their own sack lunch, and we had to put it in a specific container that went to our work site. If you put it in the wrong container, it went to the wrong work site. You didn't get lunch. We departed for our work sites about 8:30. We went to 6 or 7 different work sites each day. Some of them took people about 30 minutes to get to and back. So there was quite a lot of logistics of which vehicle you were getting in, whether you were riding a bus or van or whatever. We piled in there, which piling in wasn't too bad. Piling in after you've been sweating all day, that was another story. Yeah, it was. Texas humidity and something I don't know. So, as I mentioned, the kids will talk about the work sites. Nicole and I were on the same work site, and I will tell you that girl can work. And I think she might be getting some power tools for Christmas. We would stop and have a lunch break and eat our packed lunches, and then around 4 o'clock each day, we'd kind of pick up and think out our plans for the next day, and then ride back to the church we were staying at, which that church is a mission site. They're equipped with lots of extra cots and air mattresses so that when there are disasters in the area, they can house and have showers and things, house extra workers to help clean up and do activities like we were doing. We would have a short rest period, very short rest period, and then we would have dinner. Then we would meet in the sanctuary, and each group would get a report of what they had done for the day. So a different kid did it each day, and it was amazing how much work got done. Then after that, they would have a fun activity for us to do. Some of them were very educational. There was one I thought was particularly interesting. They had a relay race where kids had to gather water, and they would run out and gather water and bring it back to their team. And then when they got back, they realized they didn't have all the water they needed. Some of the water was polluted. Some of the water was contaminated with bacteria. Some of the water had chemicals in it. So only a small portion of the water they actually could use. And they had inoculated the water with stuff, so it looked terrible. And it really made an impression on you how precious the resource of water is. So that was a very creative game they played. Then we would have evening snack, and then we would have small group time where we'd reflect on a particular scripture that kind of went with whatever the topic they were teaching us for the day. And then lights out about 10 o'clock, and most of us, it didn't take very long to fall asleep, and then start the whole thing the next day. And then I'll just tell you a few things I learned. I learned a lot of handyman skills that I actually can use on my own home. Some of it I'd done a little bit of, but now I've done a lot of it, and I'm not afraid. So that was a bonus that I got learning how to paint and tape and install quarter round caulk and run a nail gun and how to mark the level on the door frame. Turn drywall putty and a sponge into spackling. We just learned all kinds of stuff. Another thing I learned, there are lots of young people who will work very hard and really enjoy helping other people. To watch those kids work like they did was amazing. I learned a better understanding of why some people don't evacuate during a hurricane. Some of them do not have the money for the gas. Some of them have nowhere to go. Where are they going? Some of them are afraid. They are very storm sensitive, some of them, what they have been through. Some of them have no transportation. another thing that was very interesting, they talked about in order to get assistance, they have to prove ownership of their home. A lot of them are living in homes they inherited, and they have to have the deed. Well, when their house flooded with 4 foot of water and the deed was somewhere in their house, then they're tied up with legal paperwork trying to prove they even own their home to get assistance. When I'm watching hurricane coverage, I'll have a whole new understanding of what will happen after that. And another thing I learned is maybe our neighbors in need are there for us, to give us the opportunity to grow our skills, not for us to judge why or why not they're still in their predicament, but to teach us just to love them and help them and leave the rest up to God.
My work group, we worked at 2 different houses, and we had to paint the trim that goes around windows and baseboards that we put on the lower part of the wall. And we did this at both houses, and after that we cut them at 45-degree angles so they match perfect, and we had to measure each window and the bottom part of the wall to get the exact measurement for it. And we nailed it in, and that's mainly all we did at our houses. And then on the last day, we went to the community garden, and my group had to shovel and pitchfork manure. It wasn't very fun. It smelled really bad.
So I don't feel guilty about this at all. I sent one of my group members to the top of that pile, and then I invited my young friend here to the edge of that pile with a pitchfork and said, "Help us out, brother."
It was not a lot of fun. And then after that, we learned how to milk goats there, and we just hung out there after that. And then once we got done there, we went to the dike that separates the ocean it holds out the water from the ocean, and that kept it out of Texas City. And we picked up trash along there, and you'd be amazed at how much trash is actually there, and how much we spent like 45 minutes, and how much, I don't know how many of us, there's probably around, yeah, we got a lot done just for that amount of time. And if people actually just worked on that every month and got a lot of people to work on it, they could really help it out, and it would look fine.
Okay, I'm Nicole Bushman. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my own experience. I had the best time at mission camp. If you've never been to Texas City, it's extremely hot, it's really humid, and it's really smelly. It's a refinery town, so it has a very odd, specific smell. But we had a great time. I was at the same work site all week. I was with Lois. The homeowner's name was Susan. Susan was amazing. She came to see us almost every day. She brought us ice cream. She got us pizza on our last work day. She was just such an amazing person, and it was so much fun just getting to talk to her and get to know her and get to hear her story. It was really touching to actually get to know the person you're directly helping. It makes it just that more special at the end of the week, knowing that all the work you put in was for Susan. We were doing all that for her. So when Hurricane Harvey came, Susan and her husband did not evacuate. Their house got 4 feet of water, so everything that had been underwater had to be taken out. So the floor, drywall, kitchen cabinets, baseboards, trim, pretty much everything had to be replaced. Susan and her husband have been living with their daughter for the past 2 years, and they have a 5-month-old baby, so it's not the best situation. When we got to the house, some groups had already been working there, so it looked like it was pretty much done, but we had a lot of small things we needed to fix. So our group did things like putting cord around along all the baseboards. We replaced trim around doors. We put up sheetrock in the garage. We painted a lot. We installed countertops, fixed light fixtures, and we had to call some plumbers for the bathroom. I feel very blessed to have gotten this work group. We were all very gung-ho in getting the house to look good for Susan. I got to learn how to use a bunch of different power tools, which was very fun for me. I've never really gotten to do that stuff before. In addition to the mission work we did, we also got to learn a lot about the earth and things that are negatively affecting it and how we can help. We had some speakers come to teach us about these things. The first was the Reach Beyond Mission staff, and they taught us about the lack of clean water around the world. That was the activity that Lois was talking about. This was something that was really interesting to learn about because it's something that's still affecting people in our country today, so it hit close to home. The next one was from Stephanie Thomas, PhD, who talked about climate change and what we can do as youth. And then the next one was Caroline Hamilton Arnold from Week of Compassion to tell us about all the amazing things Week of Compassion does for those suffering from natural disasters. So those were all very eye-opening, just like the rest of the week was. Obviously, I go on mission trips to serve, but I also love to go because it teaches me so much about myself. I'm coming back from this week with a new understanding of how my faith connects with the world. I pray that myself and all the youth that were on this trip continue to have a spirit of service in our hearts, and I pray that we as a church can do some mission work for our community sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Feel free. Thank you all very much. So, it was an interesting week. Someone asked me if I had a good time, and I said, I don't know that I would use that word. I had an interesting time. They're not kidding when they told you we worked. We worked a lot. My group, I led a group that was, on the first day, was 11 people, and that turned out to be too many. We ended up overpacked inside the houses we were in, so we kind of split that group up again and did it a little differently. The first day we mostly did, as some of these you've heard, we painted a lot of trim and helped a lady named Jo get ready to be back in her house. Day 2 and 3 were a little different. We went to a house, you heard me talk about it down here, went to a house owned by a widower named Toby. Toby lived 8 miles from the water. Couldn't get flood insurance. Didn't need flood insurance according to the government. Till he had 2.5 feet of water in his house. Toby is a disabled, he's 68 years old and is in relatively decent health for his other issues. His wife passed away just before the hurricane, so he's been struggling a little bit. The first day we were in his house, we had to take up all of the flooring in 3 bedrooms in the hallway because it had been done improperly. And then we reinstalled it that same day. Now, I can tell you that on that day, it was 96 degrees in Texas City. It was also about 95% humidity. Unfortunately, Toby's house doesn't have electricity. So it was 124 degrees inside Toby's house that day. I had 11 people with me. Add 11 bodies to that temperature, and it is awful. The second day we went back, it got hotter. It was 5 degrees hotter in Texas City, and it was 5% more humid that day. It was just shy of 130 degrees in that house when we left. Now, all of our retired doctors in here can tell you that the human body doesn't do very well at those temperatures. We spent a lot of money on Gatorade. The second day, we managed to finish the flooring in the hallway. We had to make all of the precise cuts that requires the floor to fit right. Then we finished all of the closets, and we got just over half of his kitchen floor laid. As Toby was standing in his bedroom, or in his bedroom hallway, looking at all of the work that had been done, all it needed was to be painted and have some insulation put in and the ceiling installed, and Toby could move back in. There were tears in his eyes as he realized how close they were. So what you all have enabled us to do by sending and helping us do this is touch the lives of I don't even begin to know how many people. People who, when you look at the outside of their house, you're not sure they need help. But when you walk through the door, you're like, okay, I see this. But like Nicole shared, I didn't, or Drew, or Lois, I'm not sure which. As we got to Texas City, I'm looking around going, where do they need help? Everything looks good. The city's back to normal. Yeah, it doesn't smell very good, but that's what happens when you go to a refinery town. As we stand there, sweating buckets, installing floor, that was not new for me, but I got a whole lot better at it. As we stand there pouring out our energy, our spirit, you come to know some people that are hurting. And it reframes what love your neighbor really means. Drew talked about the dike. The dike is 3.5 miles long. People fish on it. A lot of dead animals on it. But what mostly happens is people drive over the road and throw trash out. So the challenge was to take 30 yards of the dike in 30 or 45 minutes and pick up the trash. We picked up 80 pounds of trash in just over 30 minutes. So here's my challenge for you. I want you to look at 30 yards around you and look at the work you can do. Just 30 yards. I'm not asking you to change the world. I'm not asking you to revolutionize our community. I'm asking you to look at the 30 yards around you. What can you do in that 30 yards? Who can you help? Who can you love? Whose life can you touch in the 30 yards that surround you? Because it does make a difference. As Toby was standing there thanking us profusely, said it over and over and over again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As Joe, the first homeowner, Scout was at her house for most of the rest of the week. Joe was in tears as Thursday afternoon rolled around with Scout's group. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That thank you was not just for us. It was for you all too who enabled this trip. It was for disciples across the world because Week of Compassion is still there, working. I loved the theme of Week of Compassion from a year or two ago. We are there. You all are there. You all are there enabling us to be there. You are there enabling a full-time mission volunteer from Disciples Home Missions to live in Texas City, to do work all week long. His name is Steve. He's been there and will continue to be there until the work is done. We are there. Thank you. Thank you for making it possible. We've seen changes in our kids' lives. We've seen changes in our lives. It was a blessing. You allowed us to give of ourselves, to give of our time and our talents, to spend time ministering to people who were in need. So I offer their thank you. As I was leaving, Toby said, you told me you were a pastor on the first day. And I said, yes, sir. Please thank your church. Please thank your church. So I offer you grateful thanks from him. That was the water exercise right there. Each human requires 2 gallons, that's wrong, 5 gallons of water a day? 5 gallons of water a day. Did you know that? On average in this world, people have to walk 1 kilometer to get water. Now, that includes us who just have to walk into the next room to open the tap. That's Joe's house in the background there. If you have never been on a mission trip, I encourage you to go. It will change your life. It will change your perspective. It will change what it means to love your neighbor as yourself. One of the things we'll be looking at next year is that Reach Beyond Missions, which is the partner organization we went down to help, which is a disciples organization based in Texas. They're going to have a work site in Albuquerque, New Mexico next year. So maybe, just maybe, Central Christian Church will be sending a group. We'll see. They can only house about 16 people. So we're going to look at that and see what that looks like for us. My hope and prayer is that as you continue to live out your faith with your family, within your community, you will look at the 30 yards around you and see whose life you can touch. Would you pray with me? God, we're grateful. Grateful for the work we did, grateful for the sweat we shed, grateful for the blood we shed. We were able to be your hands and feet this week. Your grace was abundant. Your mercy new every morning. You gave us energy. You gave us the will to continue. Even when we were tired, even when we were cranky, even when we were exhausted. We got to live out what it truly means to love our neighbor. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. So, one of the verses we shared this week was John chapter 5, the story of the pool at Bethsaida. I want to share this with you briefly before we conclude our worship service. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem to one of the Jewish festivals. Now there in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, was a pool, in Aramaic called Bethsaida, which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here, a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed, and one was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. And Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, and he said to him, "Do you not want to get well?" "Sir," the man replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool. When the water is stirred, while I am trying to get in, others go ahead of me." And Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." And at once the man was cured. The story that we usually preach, or the way we usually preach this, we talk about Jesus' work. We talk about the mercy that Jesus offers this man. But I don't want you to look at it from that perspective today. I want you to look at it from the perspective of those who watched this man lay there for 38 years and did nothing. Did nothing to help. For the last 2 years, one of my work crew members said, "It's been 2 years. Why do they still need help? Why aren't they finished?" And then we learned why. Because people like Toby got $250 worth of help. We also learned that if your house was more than 50% damaged, your house was dozed. That was new information for me too. It was an entirely new world. And they still need help. People are still looking at them and not seeing them.